Sitting here like this and holding this book in I feel like we're Gilda Radner, like little dollies on seats.
Yeah, it's the best. It's really cozy. We've done this before on stage together, and that time I was reading, and we made the decision, the co-executive decision, that you were going to remain on stage with me while I read. So we decided it was only right that I remain on stage with you while you read.
We're being supportive of each other. Yeah. So not only am I graciously going to sign books, I'm graciously going to read right now because I'm that gracious.
We're trying to remind you that, women's job is to lift other women up. So I'm just going to sit here and nod and smile and already.
It's a house of love. Okay. Ready? Okay. Oh, this is from my new book. This is from The Rules Do Not Apply. My favorite game when I was a child was Mummy and Explorer. My father and I would trade off roles. One of us had to lie very still with eyes closed and arms crossed over the chest, and the other had to complain, "I've been searching these pyramids for so many years. When will I ever find the tomb of Tutankhamun?" This was in the late 70s when Tut was at the Met, and we came in from the suburbs to visit him frequently. At the climax of the game, the explorer stumbles on the embalmed pharaoh and, brace yourself, the mummy opens his eyes and comes to life. The explorer has to express shock and then say, "So what's new?" To which the mummy replies, "You." We thought it was funny. I was not big on playing house. I preferred make-believe that revolved around adventure, starring pirates and knights. I was also domineering, impatient, relentlessly verbal, and, as an only child, often baffled by the mores of other kids. I was not a popular little girl. I played Robinson Crusoe in a small wooden fort my parents built from a kit in the backyard, where I sorted through the acorns and onion grass I gathered for sustenance. In the fort, I was neither ostracized nor ill at ease. I was self-reliant, brave, ingeniously surviving, if lost. Books are the other natural habitat for a child who loves words and adventures, and I was content when my parents read me Moby Dick, Pippi Longstocking, or The Hobbit. I decided early that I would be a writer when I grew up. That, I thought, was the profession that went with the kind of woman I wanted to become, one who is free to do whatever she chooses. I started keeping a diary in the 3rd grade, and in solidarity with Anne Frank, I named it and personified it and made it my confidant. The point that prompted me to keep a diary in the first place, "I don't have a friend," Frank told Kitty, her journal. Writing is communicating with an unknown intimate who is always available, the way the faithful can turn to God. My line notebooks were the only place I could say as much as I wanted, whenever I wanted. To this day, I feel comforted and relieved of loneliness, no matter how foreign my surroundings, if I have a pad and a pen. As a journalist, I've spent nearly 2 decades putting myself in foreign surroundings as frequently as possible. There's nothing I love more than traveling to a place where I know nobody and where everything will be a surprise, and then writing about it. It's like having a new lover. Even the parts you aren't crazy about have the crackling fascination of the unfamiliar. The first story I ever published was about another world only an hour from my apartment. I was 22, living in the East Village in a 6th-floor walk-up with a roommate and roaches, working as an assistant at New York Magazine. My friend, Maida, was an intern in the photo department who knew about a nightclub for obese women in Queens. We talked about it during our lunch break when we were walking around Midtown Manhattan with our plastic containers of limp salad, dreading going back to the office. I was not a key member of the staff. It was my job to take the articles the writers faxed over and type them into the computer system. It was 1996. Email was still viewed as a curious phenomenon that might blow over. Also, I had to input the crossword puzzle by looking back and forth between the paper the puzzle crafter sent me and my computer screen, trying to remember if it went black, black, white, black, or black, white, black, black. I was in a constant state of embittered self-righteousness at the office. How had I been mistaken for a charwoman? Maida was similarly horrified by the tumble her status had taken. As a senior at Wesleyan just a few months before, nice. She had been the next Sally Mann. Now she alphabetized negatives all day. When we expressed subdued versions of our outrage to our elders, their responses invariably included the phrase, paying your dues. It was not a phrase we cared for. We decided not to wait for someone at the office to give us permission to do what we really wanted. We took the subway about 1 million stops into Queens and went to a cavernous bar in Rego Park, where women who weighed hundreds of pounds went to dance and flirt with their admirers and have lingerie pageants at 4 in the morning. It was very dark in there. The air smelled stagnant and sweaty, and the drinks were so strong they fumed. But the women were magnificent, like enormous birds, feathery false eyelashes fluttering, tight, shiny dresses in peacock blue and canary yellow, the dim light reflecting off their sequins. Maida and I stood out. We were puny, dressed in jeans and drab sweaters, little pigeons. It was scary, but electrifying. What we're writing is more important than your anxiety and humiliation, my competent self told me. So I went up to complete strangers with my notepad and asked them to tell me their stories. And they did. They told me about being fat little girls, or about how they got fat after they had children. They said they were sick of being ashamed, sick of apologizing for taking up so much space, so they'd come to believe that big was beautiful, or at least they'd come to believe it some of the time. They had passionate admirers, but it was difficult because they could never be sure if the men they dated, the chubby chasers, loved them for themselves or for their fat. For their fat, I marveled on the way back to my apartment from the subway at 5 a.m. in the fading darkness. The Manhattan around me in the late 90s was glossy, greedy, hard. The slim women on Madison Avenue on television with their clicking heels and iron straight hair gripped $1,000 handbags covered with interlocking G's. The restaurants people wanted to get into were sleek and ferociously expensive. Nobody talked about farm to table. Nobody wanted to see rough-hewn reclaimed wood. It was the genesis of internet culture, and people my age kept making enormous sums of money on startups, on all sorts of things. A friend at work optioned the first big article she published at the magazine to a producer for $500,000 when she was only 25. There was no undercurrent of fear, very little pull against the prevailing tide of self-interest at that time. My generation had never experienced a real, prolonged war. Nobody thought about terrorism. Even climate change still seemed like something that could be safely ignored until the distant future. Perhaps we would prevent it by recycling our soda cans. There was an unapologetic ethos of consumption in New York City, which the magazine I worked for both satirized and promoted. I found it alluring and alienating by turns. So to locate an underworld of women who simply opted out of that slick culture, whose very bodies were unmistakable monuments of resistance, was thrilling. As I wrote my story, which turned out to be a lot harder than I'd imagined it would, I felt I was describing an exotic universe with its own aesthetic and manners. But even more, I was writing about an unconventional kind of female life. What does it mean to be a woman? What are the rules? What are your options and encumbrances? I wanted to tell stories that answered, or at least asked, those questions.
So Ari, as those in the know call her, and I have been friends now for about 4 years, but I wanted to briefly explain how she came into my consciousness, which is that I attended a high school in Brooklyn called St. Anne's School, which is in certain circles notorious for its Hogwarts-esque student body and wildly inappropriate student-teacher relations. And Ari, a profile came out in the New York Magazine of our now deceased founder and headmaster, Stanley Bosworth, that sent wild shockwaves through the entire school community, the school board. It was being passed around like Playboy at lunch. He had said ridiculous things. He had said completely sexually inappropriate things to Ari at lunch, seemingly not understanding what the term on the record meant. We were all... A titter would be, to put it mildly. And so in my brain, Ariel Levy was like a 57-year-old Jewish man. And so when I found out that the person who had done this was like a hottie in her early 30s. My fucking brain exploded. And I was just like, oh, she's a superhero. She's a vigilante superhero. It was just beyond what I could have imagined. So she took this place of incredible importance in my life and the lives of all of the other girls at school who couldn't believe she'd gotten in there and gotten the story and gotten to get drunk at lunch and say those things and whatever. And so she was a legend to me. And so when I
Didn't I interview you then also for another New York Magazine story before anyone knew the name Lena Dunham from A Hole in the Wall?
I believe that you and I were introduced and that you interviewed me for a story where I don't think you ultimately used my quotes because it was a story about study drugs.
Oh.
And
that's what happened.
I was like, I don't take any study drugs. And you were like, cool, cool. Like someone had put us in touch, like this girl.
I was like, great, thanks for nothing, bye.
Literally, that's what it was. You were like, so Adderall. And I was like, I know it exists. And you were like, thank you so much for your time. I will no longer be speaking to you on your parents' landline.
Yeah.
But you were so impressive to me. And I kept up with, I mean, your profiles have been hugely shaped my sense of feminism, of feminist history, and it's been such an amazing thing to watch your journey from there to this remarkable work.
Thanks, little lady. You haven't done so badly yourself.
Well, I get, except I never got into study drugs, so fuck.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to, you started as a journalist, and obviously there was a version of you that was in those stories, but you started really carving out and telling other people's stories. And I guess my question is twofold, which is, you did a lot of very brave excavations of other people's lives. What gave you the sort of confidence, for lack of a better word, to get in there fearlessly and ask those tough questions, turn people on their heads, and kind of feel okay and feel strong the next morning? What was that personality type, and how did you?
Because I tell you where I got the idea of how to approach it. Tom Wolfe came in and spoke to us at New York Magazine. Like, they would have these little things where all the writers at New York Magazine would sit with like a legendary writer like Janet Malcolm or Tom Wolfe. And he gave us this speech about, you know, you're not important, but you have to think what you're doing is important. You have to think journalism and writing is important, and you have to carry the courage of that conviction with you when you start asking someone questions or when you start tracking someone down or approaching that person. You have to convey that you take this seriously and that you think there's nothing unusual about you doing it, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. You're pursuing something you believe in. And I try to hear that in my head when I get nervous.
Well, there's something remarkable, because in the book, I mean, you talk about so much in the book, but something that you talk about a lot of situations that would fail a lot of people, but for the thing that really amazed me was there were so many situations where you casually went like, yeah, and then I just, headed to South Africa, found this teenage runner, walked right up to her on the track and asked her 57 questions. And it's like, to me, that is the scariest kind of human barrier that you could cross, and also the fear of what it looks like when you impose your narrative on somebody else's life. And so I wondered how much anxiety that had caused you, or whether that was just sort of had become second nature to you.
Two things. There's a whole lot in this book about how I never could sleep when I was a little kid. I was terrified of monsters. I think I had a lot of fear in general, but the way I dealt with that, for whatever reason, was to go headlong towards anything that scared me.
Yeah.
I bet you do know.
Well, it's a similar thing, which is like, I'm afraid of, like milk that's been opened, but I'm not afraid to be naked on TV. It's like we have our, we
and
all
if you
have our
remember,
stuff.
we talked about that the very first time we met when we went to lunch.
Yeah.
How I loved it. I read a quote somewhere where she was like, someone had said, it's so brave that you're naked, and she was like, you know what? There's a lot of things that scare me, but like showing my puffy left nipple isn't one of them. Isn't that? It was something like that, or right nipple. I don't know.
It's probably the left. And there's probably a similar thing in you in terms of this sort of like dogged pursuit of other people's truth, and I would project that you're sort of locating your truth somewhere in there.
This isn't exactly what you asked, but
that's cool.
I bet you're not splitting hairs about it. Thanksgiving in Mongolia, which was a very personal story about losing my baby when I was on assignment in Mongolia, about giving birth in my hotel room. That was the story that so many people said, that was so brave of you. And that was when I felt the most, I think that's what we were talking about the first time we talked about it. That's when I felt the most like, that's not brave. Like, why would I not write about that? It's the most important thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah. Well, you just brought me very neatly to my next question, which is what did that transition from sort of, finding your own identity through writing about other people's identities, the way you talk about finding the women at the sensual obese women's club and understanding femininity through them and exposing femininity, exposing the kind of confines and magic of femininity through other people's stories. What was the transition like when you went, hey, I'm gonna take a minute and I'm gonna figure out what the fuck has been going on in my own life?
It's a really good question. I'm serious. It was really scary. It's really scary right this second. Like, it's scary doing this. Not the 92nd Street, you're my people. But writing a book starring this idiot, it's scary. It's really scary. And I just want to say for the record, I'm in the process of transitioning back to my former self. Like, I'm writing profiles. That's my first love. That's my main squeeze, is writing about other people.
Well, something that you do so brilliantly in the book is that you actually, having written a memoir and felt all the pains of what that is, I feel like you did something really intelligent, which is you talk in the book about your experience you have a couple of great, and I love that you have non-sleazy male mentors in the book. Like, that's actually like it's a really surprising read. But
I've been very lucky in that regard.
You have these amazing relationships with male editors in the book that just don't have any of the kind of darkness of that typical story.
I'll tell you why I think that is.
Why?
Because of my dad. Because the man in my life who I was raised by did not raise me as a girl. No, I'm kidding. No, but he's a feminist himself. He works for like NARAL and National Abortion, wait, that's the same thing. They all have so many
He's an abortion pusher.
He's an abortionist. No, he writes for NOW and NARAL and all these different women's rights organizations. He's a feminist. And he didn't raise me like, oh, you're like this girl. He was like, you're my little buddy. You're a person. And I think I've gravitated towards men who deal with women in that way.
I know.
Consequently.
I told David Remnick that I felt like even your brief descriptions of him in the book are one of the kind of great loving descriptions of a mentor figure, because you capture him really beautifully, and his toughness and also his sensitivity, and it's just like it's a very special depiction of that kind of relationship.
He's very unsleazy.
The least.
He's like the least sleazy.
He and Judd Apatow should go just like start an unsleazy boys club that's made up of 2 people.
That would be a weird club. Be a weird mix of skills.
Weird non-sleazy Jew guy club. But the thing that I was getting at was that I feel you did something unusual, which is you actually structured this book quite journalistically. Like, it feels as though you are the way you choose to share information, the order in which you share information, the order in which you let us know about the challenges of your marriage, about the challenges of your earlier relationships. You're meeting out information the way a journalist would, who is sort of like spinning a yarn and forming a thesis. And then you kind of sock us in the gut at the end by really announcing, like, there is no thesis, the rules do not apply. And I wondered how you felt your journalistic training and your journalistic turn of mind, how did that play into the process of structuring this, what can be so unruly, which is a few years of pure trauma?
I'm gonna answer that, but first I'm just gonna say, I'm distracted by how good at this you are. Like, it's weird.
You're very sweet to me, and you and I just happen to really like each other.
You're as good at this as I am. No, at asking other people questions. Like, who knew she could do that too? She's a very competent young woman. The point is what? The point is that I only ever learned to write as a journalist. I only ever learned to structure story as a journalist. So it makes sense that that's, I've been doing it for 20 years. It makes sense that that's what came out in the book. But I also want to say, I wonder if this is the same for you, but when I write, it's not like I have so many choices. It's not like I'm like, I think I'll do this style today.
Yeah.
I'm always only ever trying to write the best I can on a sentence-to-sentence paragraph, and then the whole bloody thing. I don't have tricks up my sleeve. I'm just trying to write as well as I can. Do you have tricks?
No, I literally have written the same sentence 87,000 times and just added different adjectives. We're gonna get found out eventually. But you know what? Philip Roth never was, so maybe we're fine.
Great.
But I have a complicated sexual relationship with him.
I would never know that from watching Girls this season.
So I wonder, the next question is, also as a journalist, you have to take on a certain kind of distance from your subjects. You develop this incredible closeness. I know from having been profiled that people enter your life in this sort of electric way, and then they have to disappear and form their thesis about you, and then you sort of run into them at a cocktail party and go like, oh yeah, you're the person who once came with me to my grandma's funeral, but we're probably never gonna talk again. So you have to develop this sort of distance and a little bit be okay with the fact that at the end of it, your subjects might not be thrilled, and you have to continue to believe in yourself. And that was a challenge for me in writing Memoir. And so I wondered, you're dealing with so many variations of sensitivity here. You're dealing with you're dealing with your now ex-spouse. You're dealing with the, father of the child that you lost. You're dealing with your parents. You're dealing with your friends. How did you approach writing about them and writing about them in a way that allowed those relationships to continue?
Okay, so to be frank, I worried and continue to worry very much about whether it was okay, it was ethical to write about my former spouse. I asked, the first person who read the book, she was the first person who read the book, and I said, anything you can't live with, I'll take out. And because of who she is, she characteristically, generously said, I'm not gonna censor you. It's your story, you write it. I'm not gonna stand in the way of that. Do what you gotta do. So generous. So I'm off the hook, technically. But morally, emotionally, I'm very worried about it. I don't know if it was the right thing to do. I don't know if it's okay, In terms of everyone else in the book, frankly, my parents, my God, it's stuff that happened 30 years ago. They can suck it up. Like, they really can't.
And backstage, they seem like they're sucking it up.
They're totally sucking it up. And furthermore, it's like, can we have the end of the suspense? Like, you knew I was gonna write about it eventually. Now we did it. Now it's done. We can relax and eat. That's how I felt about that.
Yeah. And so you feel as though, did you feel like you were sort of putting yourself through the same kind of, because as a journalist, you're constantly asking yourself ethical questions. As a memoirist, I asked myself almost no ethical questions, and then I did that whole, ask permission, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't recommend it. And so I wondered if you were being rigorous with yourself throughout the process about that.
I don't know. I can't remember.
I will say that the book is very loving, and it's very loving towards the people in your life. And something that is so appealing to me about it, which is what I wanted to ask you about next, is you're as hard, if not harder on yourself as you are on anybody else. And I wondered also what it felt like to sort of it's all the stuff that's the hardest for everyone to talk about. Drinking, adultery, confusion about your own moral boundaries, the confusion about your own sense of responsibility in adulthood, confusion about your sexuality. What was it like to suddenly be revealing yourself in that way? And did you have fears about the kind of character that you were creating?
All of that stuff is a puffy left nipple that I have no problem showing.
Yeah.
What I think is private, and I am scared about having revealed, because I think it's not something that's like a thing that you're supposed to talk about, is self-loathing. I think we all have it. We all have so much self-loathing, but it's a weird thing you're not supposed to admit to. But I felt that the experience of grief, which is what I am largely going through in the book, is you couldn't write about grief. I couldn't write about grief without writing about self-recrimination. I think it's part of the process of grieving, so it just would have rung false if I wasn't tearing myself up for it. The other thing I want to mention about what you just said, though, is that something that buoyed me with this is that I felt that it was actually important as a feminist to write about this very biblical feeling, deep, primal stuff around losing a child. Yeah. And I think it's not just about losing a child. I think that at some point in her life, every woman will have some kind of primal drama around menstruation, fertility, pregnancy, childbirth, losing a child, menopause. I mean, that is a very big part of the life of half the human population. And that blood and guts animal, like that female human animal stuff, I don't think is written about enough.
Well, one of the reasons
you do it in the show, and that's something, but I want to do it too. I think that's important.
Well,
Well, apparently, somebody agrees.
Well, one of the things I think is so important
Mom, was
about
that
the
you?
book, she is uppity in a
Mommy.
charming way. Something I think is so important in the book is in Thanksgiving in Mongolia, the essay that started it all, which is how you and I...
that started it all.
That started it all, and how you and I originally came into contact because my mind was blown open. You talk about crawling on the floor, bleeding, having basically the cave woman experience of childbirth. And although I have never been pregnant, as somebody with a chronic reproductive illness, I know what it feels like to be lying on the floor going, how did my body do this? And is it even okay for somebody to come into the bathroom and see what has just happened? And I know for me, the incredible comfort of reading your account of events and the lack of shame around, you had shame around your behavior, you had anxiety about whether your travel had been the cause of the loss of your baby, but you didn't have shame around the essential femaleness of your body. And in doing that, I think you're giving a gift to other women, because the amount of women who seem to have stigma, shame, and embarrassment around the issue of miscarriage, around the issue of losing a baby, around the issue of infertility, it's like a kind of silent plague.
Yeah.
And plenty of people whose lives sort of appear untouchable are going through that, and the hormonal hell that comes along with it, and the self-directed anger. And I wondered what kinds of responses you had gotten from other women and what kinds of doors it had opened in terms of intimacy with other women.
A couple of things. First of all, I do think that this stuff, like admitting that women are animals, is like sort of the last taboo.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to admit that. We're supposed to be shiny. It's the opposite of having blood everywhere.
Yeah.
Which is our life. I mean, that's, if you're a woman, you've had blood everywhere.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
Looks like a crime scene twice a month.
Not when you get older, it doesn't. But anyway, it's like a very minor crime.
BB gun accident.
Yeah, with like a squirrel. Anyway, what's the point? Oh, I know what else I was gonna say to you. Part of the reason that I wasn't ashamed at all to write about that is because that was the most transcendent experience in my life. It was also the most painful. My baby died. That is not okay to have happen. You know, like it's not okay. It feels not okay. But before he died, he lived. I mean, I was somebody's mother for 10 minutes. And that was the most incredible experience in my life. Why would I be ashamed? Why would I be ashamed? All I wanted to do was communicate that. And I wanted to deal with a little identity crisis, because when I got back from Mongolia, a switch had flipped in my head, and I felt like a mother. I had experienced maternal love, which is the most primal, brutal love I can ever imagine. And I had felt that. And, you know, my body had flipped a switch too. I was producing milk to feed a baby who wasn't there. So I felt like a mother, but of course I didn't look to the world like a mother because I had no child. That was a little bit of an identity crisis, that saying, this happened, this baby existed, I was somebody's mother, felt like that was my truth. I wanted to communicate. And when you said, like, that's some kind of a gift to other women, I mean, they've given it back. I think it's such a privilege to be hearing from women all the time, ever since that article came out, about miscarriage, stillbirth, losing children, like actual children who got to live, or just about these experiences around being a woman on the most intense level. Yeah. That's been incredible hearing from those women.
Well, something that you are amazing at is that Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Something about you that I've always loved is that while you are good at communicating about your shame, you are in some essential and important way shameless. And I wondered if, you know, you talk in the book a lot about the scene where you go to your friend's house and someone says, "Are you Ariel, who all the bad things happened to?" And you're like, "Yeah, I am." And you and the whole everything happens for a reason section, which read the book, it's one of the funniest things. I can't pitch it to you here, you just have to read it and then take the joke with you into your own life. But just roll with it.
It's everything happens for some reasons, several.
Yeah, someone tells her in the book, everything happens for a reason. She's like, yeah, some reasons, like I'm on this porch because I walked from the living room, like that. And it slays me.
That's the reason.
How did it feel to move through the world? So many people are not equipped to talk about pain. They're just not. They weren't raised to do it. They're embarrassed to do it. So when you're out there and you're sitting at your best friend's wedding, open about the fact that a month ago you lost your baby, open about the fact that your marriage is falling apart. Did you feel that essential inability for so many people to cross the divide?
No, I think people are desperate to cross the divide. Wow. I bet you would know this. As soon as you give people permission.
I felt it both ways. Sometimes that, and sometimes I feel like I'm the person who just like walks into the party, ruins it, and leaves. Like ruins it with my. Who's like, you'll never believe what happened to my vagina last week. Okay, I have to go. Like that.
Well, I was that person for a while. I mean, when I got back from Mongolia, I could not stop telling people what had happened. I mean, I was out of my tree, and I couldn't stop telling people what happened. There's a thing in the book where, I mean, I think this is like the most intense example of it. Not long afterwards, I went to get a bra, because I was a new size. And I actually said, I mean, in fairness to me, this was like 2 weeks afterwards, but I actually said to the saleswoman, I need a new bra, but I don't know what size I am because I'm fat. I don't know what size I am because I just had a baby. He's dead, but the good news is now I'm fat. She was like, shit.
Yeah. But she found you a fucking bra.
Yeah. Like trepidatiously.
She did her best.
She did her best. God love her.
Something that I think is still happening and wish wasn't still happening is like there's a real sort of dismissal on the part of the literary establishment about women's memoir. It's sort of like, unless you've been trapped in Namibia by terrorists for 72 weeks and fought your way out with a stolen Uzi, people are like, I don't really need to hear it from you, lady. And so I wonder, and there is a sense that everything from miscarriage to infidelity to, you know, even just the struggle of being a single mother or living in poverty or sexual assault, that it's somehow domestic drama. And I wonder how you, as a serious fucking writer, respond to that energy that we all feel coming at us when we try to tell the story of just what it's like to be, of how incredibly gruesome it can be to be a woman under the most mundane circumstances.
I definitely felt, and continue to feel, as I may be expressing, extremely self-righteous about the value of talking about the details of birth and miscarriage and all that. I feel that whatever your backbone, is there a thing that means like your moral backbone? Is that the thing?
Yeah, your moral backbone, that's what it is.
Sounds weird.
The fiber of your being.
The fiber of my moral being says to me that it's a matter of feminism to be writing about those kinds of things. So I feel self-righteous about that. The rest of it is more complicated for me because as a journalist, you're supposed to not be the story. So I don't know how much of my ambivalence around that has to do with feeling like women's memoir, or how much of it is just like, I'm not used to being center stage in my writing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of you being center stage, something that it really struck me about the book is that, I mean, there's so much of what we would now refer to in the internet world as identity politics that exists in the book. But what's so interesting is You write about being bisexual. You write about having a relationship with a man who's transitioning. You write about issues of race. You write about issues of class. You write about Judaism. You don't ever sort of name those things or situate them. Like, there's not a moment in the book of gay panic. There's not a moment of sort of, you deal with the issue of your lover who's going through a gender reassignment in a way that's like, in kind of a great way, not completely politically correct. Like, you allow yourself to really engage with your fear around that person's psychological well-being. You allow yourself to really engage with your fear around issues with your female partner, with your desire to sort of have both your gay life and the heteronormative life with the, you know, guy who's going to pay for your kids' college. And you don't try to explain it you don't try to justify yourself by going, I know this isn't the right thing to think, but I can't help it, I thought it. And so I've never read a book that was sort of so modern in its approach to human sexuality, in which there was like, the fact that your spouse in the book turns out to be a girl, it's like, you fucked guys, you fucked girls, that's the one that you married. That is the energy of the book, and that is the energy that flows throughout your being.
Thank you. I think it's because I'm a journalist. So my approach is, here's this information. Hi.
Thank you.
Oh, I know what this is.
Yep.
For a minute, I was like, is there a horrible thing happening in the subway? Thank God, no. I think as a journalist, all those things to me are just things to be reported, and I have the good fortune of having been born in a time and place and where none of that stuff you know what I mean? Like, I'm from because of who my parents are and the city I live in and the job I do, none of it matters. Nobody cares. Doesn't matter.
And what do you feel like you're going to have your fair share of reactions from, you know, 22-year-olds who, from a very noble place, feel like identity politics have to be placed front and center in a Trump America? How do you respond to that?
I'll tell you what young feminists should be focused on in Trump's America. Trump. Whatever is wrong with my book or
There's nothing wrong with your book.
If there were something wrong with my book or with my politics, I think we can say that, first of all, the only thing I really have power over is whether my cats have wet food or kibble. Like, that's the extent of my power. So worry about someone who's, for example, running the free world, who's like an avowed misogynist, orange monster. Like, I'm not the problem.
No.
I'm just not that big a problem.
I wish that I had had the bravery to say that like 7 years ago.
Well, you didn't have Trump 7 years ago.
No, so I was like, I am the problem. You're right. Obama's the best, and I'm the problem.
Oh, that's horrible. I mean, it's worse that Trump's president, but that's bad too.
The last thing I was going to ask you before we delve into these delectable questions, I already see the first one, and it's a joy, is in the book, you really tackle the question, which seems like it couldn't be tackled in a new way, and yet you have, of like, what does it mean to have it all? And you write about, I know that you mention Nora Ephron, and who is someone who was, you know, sort of my mentor in the you can't have it all department. She basically just was like, no, it's not going to happen, so get used to it. And
I don't know whoever thought, I don't know where this idea comes from, that feminism said, the thinking that you can have every single thing you want in life is not the thinking of a feminist, it's the thinking of a toddler.
Yeah. T-shirts for all.
Hashtag toddlers.
Hashtag toddlers. It's true. It's like you don't get to be.
Why is everyone, like, what feminist said you can have everything you want? They never said that.
No.
It's not a thing.
No.
And you also can't.
You just can't.
You just can't. My father said an alternate title for this book could be Tough Shit.
Then that brings me into our greatest audience question yet, which is for Lena and Ariel, and Ariel's going to answer first. In what sense are you culturally Jewish?
In one sense, am I not? Are you looking at me? I mean, my name is Ariel Levy. Stanley Bosworth, the guy she was talking about who I profiled, who was the head of St. Anne's, said to me when I was interviewing him, "What's your name? Ariel Levy? That's like being called Fred Yiddish."
He was very witty.
Oh, he was so funny. So anyway, I think my name and my look.
Face.
I just feel really, like, none of the identity stuff would I be like, I'm this, I'm that. I feel like I'm Jewish, and I'm a writer. Those are my two identity things. And you?
I feel the exact same way, and it's so funny because, like...
Aren't you only halvesies?
Yeah, but it's my mom, so you can't get away from that. Like, my mother is a full Russian Jew from Great Neck, Long Island, daughter of an orthodontist, like, fully has her accent when she gets angry. Like, it's not an avoidable thing. And, like, my father's almost just like this WASP satellite that happened to end up in my house. Like, I have his name and nothing else. And it was so interesting because when I got in all that, when I was denounced by Abe Foxman and his posse, when I wrote about the New Yorker shouts and murmurs about Jewish dog versus boyfriend, a quiz.
Oh, that was so funny.
I'm so glad you thought so. I thought it was like the kind of email you'd get that was like forwarded from your grandma in Boca. Like, I did not think it had the possibility to upset people.
You never know.
But I realized a lot of people, because of my last name, didn't understand just how Jewish I was.
Why.
And so there was that. There was all these people being like, and as a non-Jew, and I was like, oh, you don't even know. Like, you don't even know what's happening in our household.
Right.
But then it felt excitingly Jewish to be denounced by the Anti-Defamation League. It felt like a real Jewish badge of honor.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
I'm so glad that happened to you.
Someone wrote, this is to you. What do you do when you are not saving the world of the perils of bad journalism? BTW, I love you, and have been lied to as well.
Oh, I know who wrote that.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, good.
Unless I don't. What do I do?
Yeah.
Nothing. I garden.
You do.
I don't understand the question. And also, I don't save the world from anything.
Well, you do write serious, thoughtful journalism that runs in the face of a lot of what we're seeing right now. So I think you can give yourself a pat on the back for that.
Yeah, I'll take that. That sounds great.
Yeah. But you like to garden. What are your other hobbies?
I like to garden. Oh, I like to ride horses now. Dr. J taught me how to ride horses. So I spend a certain amount of the time every year now in South Africa. Like in January, while all y'all were cold, I was riding a horsey in Africa.
You guys, there's like a whole other
There's a whole other thing.
There's a whole other thing after the book, which is like the Chief Foley is like hitting it with the hot doctor from the book. Like that is the fan. So like it's like kind of like you can't have it all, but also you can because you are.
You can have some things. You can't have other things. You know, I can't have the family I wanted to have when I was 38 and this stuff in my life fell apart. But I can have something else, and it's not too shabby.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Just take it easy, girl. Just, you know, like I said, like I really did barrel towards whatever scared me. And I just was like, try strategy and figure it all out. And how am I going to control everything? And the value of losing so much was that I had no choice but to be like, I'm actually not in control. So I'm liberated to a certain extent from that illusion, and that's very soothing. But you know what? Nothing. There's nothing I could have said that I would have listened to. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh my, like same exact thing, which is just like chill out. It's going to be fine.
Calm
You're
down.
the youngest person in America. Breathe. It's going to get so much worse. Just enjoy this.
Yeah.
But also, again, she was incorrigible.
But you know what I like a lot? That you may like too?
What?
Middle age.
I feel thrilled to be, that's so exciting.
You're not there yet, sweetheart.
No, but I feel thrilled by the idea.
Oh, to hear it.
I think to myself, like, oh, in 10 years I'm going to be 40, like, that's amazing.
It's relaxing.
And in 20 years I'm going to be 50, and that sounds straight up sexy.
Then it starts to get scary. But what I like about it is I think I felt 40 from the time I was about 2. So now that other identity crisis is over, and I am, in fact, in my 40s.
Yeah, I know. My body's hurt so much since the day that I was born that it just feels like by the time I'm 90, all my friends will have caught up with me and we'll be able to sit together in the way that I want it.
That'll be fabulous.
That's the dream. Okay. Another question, what would you say to young women who have issues with their bodies?
I'd say, I'm so sorry. I'd say, I'm so sorry. But it's not something I know a ton about, actually.
Did you always feel pretty okay in your body before things got hairier in terms of the Mother Nature taking her toll?
The only time I've ever been really furious at this body is when it wouldn't give me a child, when I couldn't have children. That made me pretty angry at this body. But I forgive her.
Good, she looks great.
Oh, thanks.
She looks beautiful.
What advice would you give them?
I mean, I think it's just it's the hardest thing, which is like having to block out the millions of signals we're getting every day that our bodies look wrong or aren't enough, or even whatever body positivity movement we're seeing is like, you know, centered around, you know, fitness models who work out, like, you know, 14 hours a day to get the glutes of your dreams. Like, it's just about looking around the world and recognizing that, like, there are more people who are like you than aren't like you, and that...
Well put. That's well put.
Well, thank you. And I just... having some extra weight never stopped anybody from fucking. We all know that's...
Having a little extra weight never stopped anyone from doing a goddamn thing.
No. In fact, it makes it easier because while all of your, like, anorexic friends are shivering in a corner, you're, like...
snuggled in a cocoon of fat.
Snuggled in a cocoon of your own fat. It's a hot tip as global warming approaches. I like this question. Lena was the surfing school episode. Hannah's role in it as a journalist. Was that based on Ariel Levy of The New Yorker?
I'm sure not.
You know, I'm not going to say it wasn't, because going to explore a lesbian phenomenon in an odd, rich enclave would be the Ariel Levy special. So, in a way, yes, she just wasn't doing it for a magazine of your level of acclaim. Okay, this is going to be the last one, and I want the answer from you. What is a successful relationship?
I love that you think I know. You obviously haven't read the book. No. But I actually...
You're right, I didn't read the book.
But I do... You're pretty cute. I think a successful relationship is where you can just accept someone the way they are and know they're just doing the best they can. Like, where you're not like, whatever you do that bothers me, I'm mad at you for it because you tried to hurt me. Like, where you're just like, where you can give, you know what it is? Where you give the other person always the benefit of the doubt. Where you think, you know what, you're probably not trying to piss me off. You're probably just doing the best you can.
Yeah, that's good. Like ascribing positive intentions to another person.
Well, it means you trust each other's love, doesn't it? It means, I know I love you. I know you love me. I bet you don't. I bet you're doing the best you can, just like I am.
You don't want to hurt me.
I bet you don't.
No.
We'll be in it for you.
What would be in it for you? That's beautiful.
So that's all I got on that. What would you say is a successful relationship?
I'm going to copy you, because
right.
I don't think I know yet. But that seems right to me, is trusting that the other person is there for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And not ascribing dark intentions to their, dark intentions and a dark underside to their love for you.
Yeah.
And that's something that impresses me in the book, is that over and over again, even when people fuck up in really big ways, you let the bigness of your love envelop them.
Thank you so much. That's such a nice thing to say.
It's all over that pink and orange book. Ladies and gentlemen, Ariel Levy.
And Lena Dunham.